Airports are often filled with noise, delays, and tired passengers just trying to get through the process of boarding. For most people, it's just another routine flight. But sometimes, in the middle of all that stress, something unexpected happens, something that makes people stop, stare, and remember it for the rest of their life. On one particular flight, what started as a simple boarding turned into a story that passengers would later describe as unforgettable, all because of a single act that caught everyone by surprise. Among the travelers that day was a woman dressed in uniform, a U.S. Army officer. She carried herself with calm composure, as soldiers often do, even in the most ordinary of moments. As she walked down the narrow aisle of the plane, ticket in hand, she was simply making her way toward her assigned seat in the back of the plane. She expected nothing unusual, just another flight like any other. But fate had prepared something else. A man seated in first class suddenly rose to his feet, blocking her path. At first, the officer was taken aback. The aisle was tight, and the man stood firmly in her way. For a brief second, it almost seemed confrontational, as though he wasn't about to let her through. Other passengers looked on in confusion. Why would this man, already comfortably seated in one of the most expensive parts of the plane, stop her so abruptly? "Sorry, ma'am," the man said firmly, holding her attention. "I'm in your seat." The soldier blinked in surprise, looking at her ticket to make sure she hadn't made a mistake. She quietly replied, "No, I'm 31B," indicating her coach seat at the back of the aircraft. Everyone nearby heard her answer, and for a moment there was an awkward silence. The man's claim didn't make sense. He wasn't anywhere near seat 31B. He was sitting in luxury at the front of the plane. What exactly was he trying to do? Before she could even argue, the man reached for his belongings, stepped into the aisle, and walked right past her. He didn't look frustrated or impatient. Instead, he calmly continued walking down the plane, heading directly toward her assigned seat and coach. By now, passengers were whispering, trying to figure out what was going on. The officer stood frozen, unsure if she should follow him or correct what seemed to be a bizarre misunderstanding. And then it became clear. The man wasn't confused at all. He wasn't mistaken about his seat number, nor was he trying to play a trick. He had seen the uniform, recognized her for her service, and made a decision in that instant. He was giving up his first-class seat and taking her place in the back of the plane. No announcement, no big speech, just a quiet, selfless act that left everyone around stunned. The soldier hesitated, realizing what had just happened. But by then, the man was already slipping into her assigned seat in the crowded coach section. That left her standing in first class with no option but to sit down in the wide, comfortable chair that only moments before had belonged to him. Jessica Titus, a fellow passenger who witnessed the exchange, couldn't believe what she was seeing. She later recalled how quick and natural the man's action had been, almost as though he had planned it in advance. But it was clear this was no stunt for attention. It was genuine gratitude in its simplest, purest form. As the plane settled and boarding finished, the officer took her unexpected seat in first class. She looked both stunned and touched, her composure giving way to a quiet, humbled smile. And as the engines roared to life, the whispers among passengers continued. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something rare, a reminder that kindness, even when done in silence, could echo louder than words. But the story wasn't finished yet. One passenger, deeply moved by what she saw, decided she couldn't let the man's gesture go unnoticed. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small note, and began writing, "Jessica Titus." The passenger, who had been watching closely, couldn't just let the moment pass. She admired the officer's humble silence, but she also knew that acts of kindness like this deserved recognition. Quietly, she scribbled a few words on a small piece of paper, slipped in a folded bill, and handed it discreetly to the man in coach. The note read, "Please accept a drink or snack on me. If everyone treated people the way you treated the servicewoman today, the world would be a far better place." The man read the note and smiled softly. He shook his head and politely declined the offer, handing the money back. For him, the act wasn't about being rewarded. He hadn't given up his seat to receive gratitude or recognition. It had been done out of pure respect for the woman in uniform, out of quiet thankfulness for her service. He wanted nothing in return, not even a free snack. When Jessica later spoke about the moment, she described it as one of the most moving things she had ever seen on a flight. She explained how the man's actions spoke louder than words, that while so many people spend their time rushing through life, wrapped in their own worries, this stranger had stopped everything to honor someone else. And for the officer, the gesture seemed to carry even greater weight. Military personnel often live with the knowledge that their sacrifices go unnoticed by the public. They serve without expecting thanks. Yet here she was, sitting in a first-class seat she had never expected to occupy, placed there by the quiet determination of a stranger who simply wanted to say, "I see you, and I'm grateful." Throughout the flight, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Passengers seemed lighter, more patient, even inspired. Some exchanged kind smiles, others offered small courtesies to their seatmates. One small act had changed the mood of the entire plane. As the hours passed and the plane touched down, passengers gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. The officer walked quietly down the aisle, her posture tall but her eyes shimmering with emotion. She paused for just a moment near the man who had given up his seat. Their eyes met, and though no words were exchanged, the gratitude was clear. It was the kind of moment that didn't need a speech, the kind that stays in the heart forever. When Jessica later shared the story online, it spread quickly. People around the world were touched by the man's generosity. Many called it a reminder of the kind of respect and kindness that should always be shown, not just to those in uniform, but to anyone who crosses our path. In the end, the man remained anonymous. He didn't come forward to tell his story or accept any recognition. But perhaps that's what made it even more powerful. He didn't do it for attention. He did it simply because he believed it was the right thing to do. In a time when the world often feels divided and cold, this simple exchange on a crowded airplane was a shining reminder that kindness still exists, and that sometimes the quietest gestures carry the loudest echoes. So, the next time you're on a flight, or in line at a store, or simply passing someone on the street, remember this story. A stranger gave up a first-class seat for a soldier without asking for anything in return. And in that one small act, he reminded an entire plane, and now millions of people, that goodness is still alive.